everyone, it's Raquel here. In today's video, we are going to continue our discussion about Christmas conversations with your family and friends. In my previous video, I shared with you the first key component to having a peaceful and positive conversation about Christmas with your family and friends, and that was to set the boundaries in your own family first, to know exactly what you mean when you say that you're not going to celebrate Christmas anymore. So today we're going to continue that conversation, and I feel like this second key component is incredibly important and one that we sometimes forget to have in our zealousness for truth. And our zealousness for truth is not bad, it's not wrong, but it needs to be tempered with wisdom and love. So today we're going to talk about the second key component to having conversations with your family and friends about Christmas, and that key component is to have a perspective of compassion when you talk to them. But first, I want to welcome you to this video and to my channel. If you're not already a subscriber and you don't know who I am, my name is Raquel, and I make videos all about enthusiastically and practically living out God's Word in our hearts, homes, and families. I would love to have you subscribe and also join us on Facebook at WomenLivingTorah. I'll put a link to that in the description box. And if you are a subscriber already, thank you so much for coming back and spending these few moments with me as we talk about these Christmas conversations and the contentions that can sometimes happen as a result of you deciding that you're no longer going to celebrate Christmas. Christmas can be such a hot topic, and it's unfortunate because you share with someone that you're not going to celebrate Christmas anymore, and it just goes downhill so quickly. They feel judged, you feel defensive, it becomes a you versus me issue, it becomes a truth versus paganism issue. We want to do as much as we can on our part to live peaceably with all men, like it says in Romans chapter 12. We want to do our part to have a positive conversation with someone else. And, you know, these key components that I share with you in the previous video, this video, and the next video, it doesn't necessarily going to guarantee that your family and friends aren't going to get offended, but it can at least help you to ensure that you're doing everything that you can to be respectful of them while also not compromising your own beliefs. And I think it's really important that we have a clear conscience before God for what we believe, but also for the way that we share our belief. So today we're going to talk about this second key component, which is to have a perspective of compassion toward our family and friends. Without compromising our beliefs, we need to talk to our family and friends from a perspective of compassion. Now, what does that mean and what does that look like? You know, I think first it starts back with understanding that we are only where we are because of God's grace. You know, there's scriptures that talk about in times past we were such and such and such and such. But now, because of God's grace, we're no longer those things. And it's because of God's mercy in our life that we understand the scriptures as we do, and we're continuing to learn and to grow. And so I think first understanding that it was God who enlightened our eyes. It was God who let those scales fall from our eyes. And that He's the one that draws all men to Him. He's the one that reveals truth to us. He's the one that convicts hearts. And that's not our job. I mean, certainly God can use us as a vessel for His glory to, you know, do those things, to share a scripture with someone or to be an example in their life of something. But ultimately, it is the Spirit of God which is going to do the work. And that's not our job. So we can just unload that burden off of ourselves before we ever go to talk with our family and friends about Christmas. You know what? They don't have to accept my belief. They don't have to, you know, follow my logic. They don't have to want to have an in-depth discussion about my beliefs, because ultimately it's not about me. Ultimately, if they are going to see truth as I understand it, then it is going to be God who reveals that to them. And so that takes a lot of pressure off of us whenever we are going to communicate with our family and friends about Christmas. We don't have that pressure to convert them. Had to go get my dumpling because she was crying. All right. Yeah. Oh, back to what we were talking about. I was talking to my friends. I was talking to my friends on the camera. You want to say hi? I want to just encourage us to emulate the compassion that God has shown us toward our family and friends this Christmas season, and to have a perspective of compassion when we go to them to talk with them, instead of, accusation, instead of assumptions about ill intent on their part and things like that. So how do you get this perspective of compassion? Because we do feel very strongly about what we believe. There's a reason why we believe what we believe, and we do want our family and friends to believe the same as we do. There's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. I think knowing who our audience is probably the key to having this perspective of compassion. First, are they believers? If they're not believers, not professing believers, then they really need our compassion because they don't know God. It's not, you could list all the scriptural reasons why you don't celebrate Christmas anymore, why they shouldn't celebrate Christmas anymore. You could list, all the different historical things about Christmas, but to them it's not going to make any difference because they don't know who God is, and for that reason alone, they need your compassion. If they are a professing believer, then I think it's important to know why many of them choose to still celebrate Christmas. Oh my goodness, this little girl is so cute. You're so adorable. Sometimes I think we come at our family and friends with accusations and with assumptions of ill intent on their part. Like, oh, well, you're just, that's just idolatry, and you're worshiping a false god, and you're just trying to justify your wickedness and things like that. And I don't really think that's fair on our part to say that, because at least, I know there are certainly people out there who are rebellious against God, who do want to not follow him and really don't care about what they do and how it affects God. But for the most part, our family and friends that are still celebrating Christmas are not in that category. I find that there's actually two different categories that our family and friends usually fall into. The first one is that they still celebrate Christmas because they don't think it's pagan. You might list out all the historical traditions and everything like that, and they say, well, I'm not worshiping a false god. I'm worshiping Jesus Christ. I'm celebrating his birth. And they're partially correct. Their intent is to celebrate Christ's birth. I'm going to link an article called Why I Don't Celebrate Christmas by Tim Hague at Torah Resource in the description box. And he really goes in depth about how the intent of Christmas began and how the traditions of Christmas came in. And I think that it's really important to be able to differentiate the two and be historically honest with Christmas, that Christmas was started by 4th century church fathers. It was not a, pagan festival in that sense of intent. The idea of celebrating Christ's birth, as I understand it, started with church fathers. And then it's the traditions, though, that came in from pagan festivals that makes Christmas pagan. So I think it's important that, whenever your family and friends are saying, well, it's not pagan and I'm not celebrating a false god, I'm celebrating Yeshua Messiah, I think it's important to understand that, in a sense, they are correct. That is what they are doing. And that way, we're more compassionate in that we're not just assuming that they're just trying to be idolatrous or, anything like that, not trying to be pagan. And then there's a second reason why I find people still celebrate Christmas, and that is because even if it is pagan, based on their understanding of the writings of Paul, they can choose to celebrate that day anyway and kind of like take it back for God. And you hear that a lot. We're taking this day back for God. So they don't care if it's pagan, because in their understanding of the scriptures, they can observe any day that they choose, whether it's pagan or not, and they can give God glory on that day in the same way that the pagans gave their gods glory. This is not a Christmas issue. This is a Torah issue. This is a how we understand scriptures issue, how we understand Yeshua, how we understand Paul. This is not our family and friends just trying to justify wickedness, as I've heard people say before, but this is just a fundamental difference in the way that we understand the scriptures. And so I think from that, having that perspective that, you know, my family and friends, I don't agree with the way that they're worshiping God. I don't agree with the traditions that they're using, but they're not trying to worship a false god. They are not trying to just justify wickedness and do their own thing. I think that just having that perspective gives us more compassion, knowing our audience, that they truly do love God. And our differences of opinion here are based on a difference in understanding the scriptures. It's not a difference in sincerity in our walk with God and our relationship with God. Again, I'm not saying to compromise your beliefs and say, oh yeah, you know what, you are celebrating Christ's birth, so it's okay, go ahead and put up your Christmas tree. I'm not saying that at all, and I'm going to talk more about communicating in the third key component. But I am saying that if we don't, you know, start pointing the finger and having accusations and having ill intent assumptions about our friends and our family, we are going to have that perspective of compassion that God has shown toward us, and we're going to remember where we came from, and our conversation is just going to go so much more peaceable. It's going to go so much more positively than if we had come at them with a finger and saying, you know, Christmas is a pagan tradition and you're just trying to worship a false god. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to say compromise your beliefs at all. I'm not saying that at all. Having compassion does not mean compromising beliefs. We certainly see that God is a very compassionate God, and in fact it is his #1 attribute that he uses to define himself. But at the same time, while he's compassionate, he also gives us the definition of truth. From him comes truth. So compassion and truth go hand in hand. They're not opposites. It's not compromising to be compassionate when you talk with your family and friends. And if it doesn't go well, then at the very least, you know that you did as much as you could to be peaceable and to be positive and to share your understanding of the scriptures in love and with compassion. I would love to hear from all of you about your experience sharing with your family and friends that you are no longer celebrating Christmas. Did it go well? Did it not go well? What could you have done differently? And what do you think went right? Please share with us in the comments so that we can all learn from you and maybe apply it even to our own situations. Guys, thank you so much for joining me for this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I look forward to sharing with you in this next video the third key component, which is where we're actually going to communicate to our family and friends that we're no longer celebrating Christmas. So make sure you're subscribed and you've hit that notification bell down below so that you don't miss out on that video. I'm also looking forward to chatting with you in the comments. I'm going to see you guys later. God bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.